Hey guys, Scott here. Today we're going to go over the February 2026 community stream. They're going over the next patch we're getting in the PTB in a couple of days with the Trickster Rework and the new map. So I'm going to go in order of importance, so save you as much time as possible. We're going to go focus on the most important things and then decrease in importance from there, at least in my opinion. So first up, the actual new map itself, the Trickster's Illusion. It's in its own separate realm now, so I think that means statistically you're probably more likely to get it than a lot of other maps. So this is going to be a static map. A static map is a map like, Raccoon City Police Station, where it's the same layout every single time. So occasionally there can be like a little tiny differences, like where a pallet can spawn or something, but it's going to be the same static layout, which I am okay with. Like, I don't really mind static layouts at all. In fact, it makes those maps even easier to balance because you don't really have to adjust for random permutations like, oh, this seed was really bad and it was unplayable, but this seed was totally fine. When it's a static setup, you have the same setup basically every single time. So that makes it really easy to balance. So that's a really good sign. The map itself is, I'll just get this out of the way, absolutely gorgeous. For a Dead by Daylight map, this is an over 10-year-old game now, or almost 10-year-old game. This map looks excellent. It looks really, really, really good. If we compare it to the last map with the Walking Dead Abomination Piss, this is just like, it's not even the same video game. So aesthetically, absolutely incredible. I am very excited to just walk around and just be in it and just look in it. But, that wears off pretty quickly, so let's move on to the actual gameplay of it itself. Again, without playing on it, it's kind of hard to tell, but I would say I am not super concerned with it. I'm pretty neutral about it from what I saw. So I was worried that we were going to have Badham Preschool syndrome, where Badham Preschool is basically just 4 indoor maps connected by like a street. And as you know, that can really hurt a lot of killers that require line of sight. Like, 75% of the killers in the game can't really do anything on those congested indoor areas. So the more congestion, the harder it is to actually, compete on those maps. So when I originally saw it, I was like a little worried about that. But I do think there's a pretty decent mix of claustrophobic areas and kind of outdoor areas. Like the whole bottom left section, which is the market and the park, is pretty outdoors and is just as cluttered as, like a coal tower or just like any other outdoor map. But then to the right of it, the low streets is basically an indoor-outdoor map where there's a wall every 2 feet and you can go inside some of these buildings. So this will be a really interesting look at combining those things and putting them right next to each other. So, like, for example, if you are a killer that has a dash power, you might want to hold the 3-gen near the market and, that area, which is a lot more open. And if you're a stealth killer, you might want to be prowling, the low streets area or like the top right area that's a bit more congested. So it's kind of interesting that it's a map that allows you to pick an area and then play to your strengths of your killer in that area. There's not really been an area in any map in DBD like that. So that's a really interesting way to do it. So there's going to be some shitty areas and some good areas, but it's not like Badham Preschool where you have access to them from the main street anywhere. They're kind of like, sectioned off into like different corners. So it's not like, if you're in the top right, you can instantly get to the outdoor section in the bottom left and vice versa. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. I think aesthetically, like I said, it's fucking gorgeous. Absolutely amazing. How is it going to be to play on? I'm not sure. The one request I have, if they haven't done this, is they have a lot of very big buildings that encompass the entire corner of one of these sections. I just need them to make sure there are ways to cut through those buildings. If not, we're going to have, basically Haddonfield fence syndrome, where it takes 20 minutes to just rotate around a building to get to somebody. From what I've seen, a lot of these buildings you can cut through. There's like little shops and markets and stuff. So I think that should be okay. But until I actually play on it, I can't really say for sure. Also really neat to this map, it has unique generators where it will have a little light next to it. This is really good because it's a very cluttered map. Sort of like how on Larry's there's blinking lights outside rooms with generators. On this map, there's going to be a green generator symbol on buildings with gens and things like that. So that's really good to help new players and frankly everybody when we're first learning this map to kind of understand where to go and where the objectives actually are. Because on maps like this, it can be extremely confusing. But other than that, it's really good. Compared to the last one they made, this is 50,000 times the effort. Looks really good. I expect this took a lot of work to make, so I'm very excited to play on it. So next, let's talk about the Trickster, since he is shipping with, his own realm basically coming out. So I'll be honest, I'm kind of whelmed by what I saw from the Trickster update. I think one of the major issues with Trickster, he's a miserable killer to go against, and they did absolutely nothing to change that whatsoever, so he's just going to be as miserable to go against. But they did tack on a new style system. It's not really new. It was kind of in the game, but it had very small effects. They're basically making this style system a more prominent aspect of the gameplay. So as you upgrade in style, you throw knives faster, you reload faster, and you can activate main event when you get to, I believe, S rank. So you're basically going to get buffed and buffed and buffed as you get more of this style. You get the style by hitting survivors with knives, M1ing them, kicking pallets, just basically doing things you'd normally do anyway. With one caveat that repeated actions, other than I think throwing knives, don't really add to your style points. So if you kicked 2 pallets, like, you wouldn't gain more style, or if you M1 2 survivors, you wouldn't gain more style after the first one. So they want you to kind of like sort of alternate, I guess. But I think my whole problem with this style skill trick shot system is that that's an extremely hard thing to automate. They specifically said that they have a system that's going to detect if you're doing crazy shots like through a shack crack, like a little crack in the wall, and hitting a tiny pinpoint precision shot. They've claimed that they're going to give you more style points for things like that. I personally think that's an incredibly hard thing to automate. What I think is going to happen is people are just going to ignore this system entirely. It is too much effort to like think, oh, I knifed this guy twice, but now I need to kick this pallet and M1 this guy to build up more style points. What I think is going to happen is people are just going to ignore it, play Trickster, and occasionally realize, oh shit, I'm an S rank, cool, and now I'm way stronger. Because when you go to S rank, every nearby survivor is also revealed. You're buffed entirely just from throw rate and reload speed and stuff like that, and you can transition into main event whenever you want, which also refunds your style points. So I feel like they made a complicated system that no one is going to really engage with. That's my main problem with it, because, like I said, unless it's worth it to like drop chase to kick a pallet and alternate what you're doing, the best play is still always going to be just throw knives at someone and down them. And since there's no real change to that in any regards, you're still just going to throw knives at people and down them. And you're going to get style points doing that anyway. So it's sort of a passive thing that buffs you when you were just doing something that you were already doing. So the one downside is there was a slight nerf to the amount of knives that Trickster has. It's down to 36, which is, it's a pretty small nerf. But from what I can tell, everything else is going to be stronger, because as you get more and more ranks, you're just going to throw faster and faster, reload more, and you can make the decision on whether or not to use main event or keep the buffed high S rank. Because once you use main event, if you don't hit anybody and it's not like refunded, you're going to like, lose the effects of that stuff. So my whole problem is here, this doesn't really change how the Trickster plays. They've designed a system where ideally it would change how you play, but what I think people are going to do is entirely ignore this system, continue playing as they always do, and occasionally get a sweet side buff where they're reloading a lot quicker and throwing a lot faster for just playing the game normally. That's my main issue. I think they designed an entire system that nobody is going to interact with meaningfully. I mean, it'll happen passively, but no one's going to go out of their way to get combo points, because you're going to want to hit people with knives. Like, what were you doing before? Missing knives on purpose and lowering your style points? No, you're going to want to consecutively hit people. That's how you play the killer. And nothing about this is really changing that. So no one's going to, like, put 2 knives in someone and then kick a pallet to gain another style point. They're just going to try to down the guy. So overall, I think this was kind of a miss, and it didn't really fix one of the biggest issues with Trickster, in which he is very miserable to play against, because the counterplay is just hold W. It's just hold W and put shit in between you, and that's it. It's just very boring. It's just not a very fun killer to go against. So I think the Trickster rework is kind of a miss. They didn't really change anything meaningful. There's a cool little, rank you get at the top of your screen, probably to show how accurate you've been recently, but other than that, like, I don't really think this is going to do much of anything. So Trickster Rework, not great in my opinion. Next is the Fog Vial update, and I kind of like what they did with this. Fog Vials were really weird, because when they released, there was a couple of maps where they were way too strong, a couple of maps where they did basically nothing, and then a lot of stuff in between. It caused a lot of differing opinions, because the map determined how obstructing the fog was going to be. Now they have made it so the fog is static on every map, which is definitely something they should have, done on release. So that's very good to see. And they've sort of changed how fog vials work now. Now it is a distant obstruction. Once you're in the fog, you can see pretty clearly. So it's not like if you're in melee range of the killer, you can drop a fog vial and just lose them. It's not going to happen. So A lot of people were bitching in the chat saying this makes fog vials useless, but I think people are just not thinking outside the box. This is still actually really useful for a number of reasons. For example, if you're going to unhook somebody, you can drop a fog vial. If the killer's starting to come back, you can drop a fog vial, and both the survivors are going to have a 5-second head start in some direction the killer cannot see where you're going. So just things like that. Or if you see that a blight is rushing at you from a distance, you drop it early, and you can go in a different direction for a couple of seconds. That might add, 10 seconds to your chase time. I don't think it's going to do anything crazy or anything like that, but it's going to be enough to make the killer not start the chase in an optimal way if you use it at a distance as you're supposed to. So this is great for any ranged killers, Huntress, your Deathlingers, your Vecnas, anybody that's like that. It's going to be hitting you at a distance, dropping that. You are completely obstructed. You cannot be seen whatsoever at a distance. So I think that's cool. It's sort of a counter to ranged powers, but if a killer's in your face, it doesn't really do anything. So they're just sort of changing how that works, and I think people need to think outside the box a bit before writing this off, because I do think that'll actually be genuinely useful against a lot of killers in the game. So I think this is actually a pretty big buff to fog vials. You just have to use your brain a bit and not just chuck it down when a killer hits you. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they do with this. In some great quality of life, we're getting an aura reading update. So there was a previous color code to a lot of auras, like survivors would be white, generators are red, things like that. But now you can actually customize the colors of all of your auras to be whatever you want. That's really great, especially this is kind of a small nerf to Survivor, because sometimes survivors would hide behind a generator to dodge something like barbecue and chili, but now you can have the generator be white and the survivor's blue or something, so it'll be very obvious when a survivor's hiding there. So anything to help visibility and things like that, I'm completely for. I think there's no real downside to adding customization like this, so overall this is a great change. Kind of goes with the scratch mark change they made recently, and this is kind of really nothing but upside. We are also getting a rework to the verbiage of a bunch of perks and powers and things like that. I think most of this is pretty good, but some of it is kind of just more confusing than it needs to be, and I'll go over what I mean by that. So first off, they're just making like perk descriptions a lot simpler. They're removing the intro flavor text, like for Dead Hard. It's like you can take a beating, and then the actual perk. And they're simplifying things a lot, and they're also adding expanding tooltips, kind of like you ever played like Baldur's Gate 3. You can press T over a term you don't understand, and it'll pop up another window explaining what that term is, which is really good for new survivors. Because if I see Lithe and I see I get exhausted for 40 seconds, I'll be like, okay, what does that actually entail? What is the full effect of that? What does haste entail? I mean, you can kind of figure out as a new player what these are probably going to mean, but it's nice to have, a button you can right click now and just see the exact definitions of all these terms. You can also see the icon associated with that term. So if you use Lithe for the first time and you see a heart symbol, you're like, what the hell does that mean? That means you're exhausted. So it's just a good thing to help new players. Again, no real downside to this. I think streamlining the stuff is absolutely great. But then I think they kind of went overboard and they kind of made a bunch of changes that are just kind of useless. So they have started to like clarify different forms of interactions. Like they're now calling power breaks with a power, like if you chainsaw a pallet, that is now called a special break. And if you vault a window, like with Wesker, that's called a special vault, as opposed to just a regular vault and stuff like that. I don't know, like that's fine, but it's leading to like, I think, more confusion than before, because like now we're having perk descriptions like Spirit Fury. It still says when you when you like regular break a pallet, then you gain a charge or Spirit Fury, but it also still does account for special breaks with powers, so it's just straight up misleading. I feel like this whole thing is just completely unnecessary. I think people are able to understand the difference between pressing spacebar to vault the pallet, or to vault the window, and then, like a special power usage to vault the window, and how they're different things. I feel like a lot of this is just unnecessary and actually complicates things even further, because now we have to worry about 4 different types of new interactions between vaults, special vaults, breaks, and special breaks, and now explosions are explosions and not generator regression events. Like, it's just adding more and more terms when I think people kind of understand this shit already. So I think this is unnecessary, and I think they kind of had the reverse effect of actually making things more complicated. And like I said, things like Spirit Fury just straight up have the wrong description, even in their own examples now. So it kind of doesn't really make any sense. I get what they're going for, and the first example of simplifying perk descriptions is great, but simplifying these killer actions and stuff like that, I think it kind of just made it more complicated. Finally, we have the new killer, the Angel Killer, and the whole Power of Exile and sort of like, judgment effect. They have gone over a couple of examples of what they've been trying. Their first was this sort of ray that has a charge time, and then you kind of drag it across an area. They felt that the skill expression of it was not good because it doesn't look really great. It looks like you're just drawing a line that doesn't seem particularly hard. So now they're trying this other thing where it's not quite like Vecna 2, where instead of a power popping out of the ground, you now have an orbital laser striking the ground. But it seems to be more of like a shockwave that you sort of drag. From what I can tell from this, like the more he looked to the right, the faster it accelerated away. And if he very slightly moved his camera to the right, it slowly moved that direction. So it seems to be like a sort of awkwardly aiming perpendicular shockwave, which I'm not really sure how that's going to work. It seems kind of awkward to aim, but if it seems like if a killer is good with it and knows how to do it, it's going to be like really hard to dodge because it seems to go through floors. It goes through collision, and they've said they wanted to go through collision. So without really having an actual chance to play this, I can't tell what this is going to be like. It could be pretty damn busted, but like I said, I need to physically control it and see how easy it is to dodge to make any comments on that. So there's also the exile element to the power, which is what I thought they were going to do with Vecna, but I guess they are saving it for this killer, where if you're struck by a killer's power, you are stuck into this exile area, kind of similar to the, Halloween events or the anniversary events, where you're in a separate realm entirely, and you have like basically these beams of light shooting down at you. This whole thing basically counts as a hook state too, and the more you get hit by the beams, the quicker your hook state goes down, which is actually a pretty interesting way to do you being in another world. But there's like going to be these like crystals that you can use to escape this kind of thing. So it's basically going to be like a pyramid head cage you can escape yourself, but it's also determined based on how well you do, because your timer could be shorter if you fuck up and get hit by these beams. You have to collect these crystals to escape, and they talked about having some of these crystals actually be surrounded by even more light beams, but those crystals give you more of a bonus to escaping. So like a little risk reward thing there. I'm not sure how that's going to go, because if it's too oppressive, it's going to be RNG bullshit and you just died or just random light. But if it's not strong enough, it'll be useless. You might as well just hook people. So that's going to be really difficult to balance. I'm actually not really sure how they're going to do that. Again, that's something I need to really test to see how you can make that both counterable but also threatening in some way. So I don't know how it's going to work. It's an interesting idea, and I want to see them go forward with it. But again, this is, months and months away before we even get a PTB for this type of thing. So plenty of time to iterate on it, but those are all of the main points of the patch I wanted to go over. The PTB will be this Tuesday, which I'll definitely be checking out. Hope to see you there. Thanks for watching. See you next time.